Hey guys, back with week 3 of the Deadbolt budget build. Now the upgrades are actually already done to this truck as you see it here. However, after going through the entire process and filming the whole deal, what I was worried about was overwhelming some people with how complex we got this week with a little bit of fabrication. But what I wanted to do is come in, kind of reshoot the opening, figure out exactly how we want to do this to allow some of you guys who are not interested in fabrication in the slightest to just be able to pick and choose upgrades that you're going to be able to bolt on instead of exactly what we did. Now, the goal for this week was to fabricate new links. Now, fabrication of links does not have to be difficult. I've actually done a very in-depth video of multiple ways of doing links, and I'm going to link that below for you guys that are willing to jump in and start fabricating links. Now, in addition to the methods that I used in that video before, I actually went into a different method with this truck as well, something that has some pluses and some minuses versus some of the methods that I showed before. I'm going to include those in this video or a part 2 for this project depending on exactly how long this video gets. I don't want to make this video way too long, so if it does end up that way, I'm going to release another video yet this week to give you guys more in-depth detail of exactly what we got done. Now, along with replacing the links in this truck, I didn't want to stay with the exact same setup that we had. What I actually decided to do was move the servo from on the axle to mount it in the chassis. But things got a little bit sticky there because the Deadbolt has the 12-inch wheelbase, not the longer 12.4-inch wheelbase that the Honcho or Jeep JK has from Axial. So there isn't a chassis-mounted servo with Panhard kit available for this 12-inch 12-inch wheelbase that I wanted to use. But the parts are available separate for the axle mount as well as the chassis mount, and then we just had to fabricate our own links. Now, the reason that I did a chassis mounted servo was for scale appearance. If you're not as concerned about the scale appearance or anything like that, that is where you can get away with buying something much simpler. You can buy just a set of metal replacement links for this wheelbase, and you're going to be off to the races cheaper than what we spent this week, and also with less fabrication needed on your end. For that way, if you wanted to go just a way of bolting on a new set of links, I'm going to provide the part numbers for exactly what you want to do below in the description. I want to try and cover all the bases for you guys in case this isn't, again, something that you want to get into. A quick note. Now, again, I had mentioned that there was not a chassis-mounted servo setup with Panhard for this truck as is. Now, that's as of today, which is mid-November 2014. I am trying to get the Vanquish guys to get the setup that I basically put together here and offer that in a kit. So make sure that you know the date that this video was put out and what parts are currently available. As time changes and these videos get older, those parts may be available. So make sure you check back and see if those parts are available at Vanquish now for this exact same setup that I'm running. Now, if they are available, I'll try and come back and update the description of this video with that part number as well, in case it is something that now you can bolt on. I want to give you an overview of exactly what we did on the truck this week, and then you can decide if this method is something that you would like to do, or if you're going to go the route of just picking up some parts to replace the links in the setup that was already in the truck. What you see underneath here is a set of all stainless links. These were made out of 3/16 solid stainless rod that I ran a die over. Now, that die was a 1024. You can use a 1024 or a 1032 directly over the OD of 3/16 stainless rod. Now, you do have to drill out the rod ends that you use. These are Revo rod ends, and they're the ones that I suggest you do. Now, it's a very simple way to make links, and it's very quick. However, like I said, you have to drill out that Revo rod end, which can weaken it slightly. That is why the links that you can buy pre-made, or if you have the lathe to turn down the OD of that link and then run an 8/32 die over the end of it, that is a little bit stronger. But again, this method, very easy, and you can do it with basically no tools other than something to cut the link with and a die and handle. Now, in the rear, all I did was measure the stock links and then replicate those in stainless. Absolutely no change there. It's still a 4-link, just like out of the box, except now there's no flexing to that when you get this thing in a bind. You will notice, though, that I did put a double bend in it. Now, what that does is it gives you just a little bit more clearance in the back. It's not necessary. It's just something I did because I was playing around a little bit. Give myself just a little bit more clearance in advance of that tire so that as it's coming up on a ledge, it doesn't hit that link before it hits the tire. But it still protects that drive shaft as the drive shaft is still above the bottom of those links. In the front is where we see all of the changes though. Now, out of the box, this was a 3-link basically, but a Y or a wishbone upper link. So what we went to now is a 3-link with Panhard. So we have 2 lower links and then only 1 upper link. Now that upper link on here has a bend in it to clear the chassis. Now where that single upper link goes to is this Axial mount here from Vanquish. Now what that does is it grabs that 3rd link as well as the Panhard link. Now a Panhard link goes from the axle up to the chassis, side to side rather than front to back. And that link now is what locates the axle laterally. So it's what controls the side to side movement of the axle. When you have a 4-link like in the rear, the triangulation is what locates that axle laterally. Now, I understand some of this can get a little bit confusing if you're not 100% aware of all the physics of how a suspension works. But if you're not, you can just get these parts and kind of follow along with what we're going to do here and understand it as you go, basically. Now, this axle mount piece here is available separately from Vanquish. Along with that, the other piece that you need is the servo mount that goes on the side of the chassis here. That also has your Panhard mount on the chassis side. The last bit of link replacement that we did was the steering links. We did a new tie rod and drag link. The drag link now goes from the knuckle to the servo rather than from the servo to midway on the tie rod. A minor change there, but something to note. Now, in the last video, when we needed a couple of pieces of hardware, I also mentioned a place to get bulk hardware, and that was from Screw Loose Hardware. I added a link to that last video. You can also go to my website, harleydesigns.com, and there's a link under my old HD hardware link to where you can buy their bulk hardware setup. The reason I mention that is you will need some hardware for this entire mod. Just some random pieces here and there just to make sure that you get everything done. If you get a set of bulk hardware, you'll be thankful over and over and over. It really is something that you will totally understand the need for once you have it. Now, once we moved that servo up onto the chassis, a couple of other things start to get in the way. It does kind of become a little bit of a domino effect as you start making changes to a car like this. Now, last week we moved the battery to the front for weight reasons. Now, when we move that servo up there, it starts to get in the way because it sticks up just a little bit too much. So what I decided to do was take out those spacers from underneath of the battery tray that we had last week and just lower it all the way down. But you do have to cut the battery tray slightly to make that happen. All I did was kind of marked around where the servo was and cut that out. You can do that with a Dremel or hacksaw, any of the tools that you have around the house. Again, not something to worry about being all that difficult. But we were able to lower that battery tray all the way down now. So now it's almost as low as it can go and all the way to the front. We could mount the battery sideways just behind the shock towers as well, but at this point I'm going to leave it all the way in the front for that weight bias. Now, as that servo sits up front, the wire for the servo actually has to point out the front. That makes it a longer run from the very front of that servo all the way back to where we had that receiver box before. So what I did is I just took the receiver out of that box and I mounted it to the side of this tray that I built before. So now my receiver just sits there on the side. As we go, I will go over waterproofing methods. Out of the box, this thing is not waterproof. That receiver box, not waterproof at all. It will leak if you get this thing underwater. The holes are wide open. So as we go, we'll go through the waterproofing process. Actually, either adding a waterproof box, the receiver box from Traxxas is an easy bolt-in and super simple and cheap to do. And then we'll go through the other waterproofing methods that we have of whatever electronics that we have at that time. Now that we replaced the steering links, we are going to have a much more rigid steering system. But now any force that comes in contact with these wheels is going to be translated directly to the servo. So those plastic servo horns that come with the truck are not going to last. You need to replace the servo horn with something metal. For the time being, with this servo that's only 150 ounce inches, I didn't go overboard with the servo horn that I picked up. I picked up a simple aluminum servo horn. It just slides on and bolts through. Nothing crazy at all there. I did not go with like a double clamping or anything like that. That is what I will use when I go to a much stronger servo, but for now, not necessary. Just picked up something affordable. I do have one thing to confess on this build, and that is there is something on this truck that I haven't added in the budget, and that's this Castle BEC that I've been trying to hide and tuck around this whole time. It is sitting here in the car, but the reason I haven't added it to the budget is because I'm not using it yet. The only reason that it's in there is when I first got the car and I installed the Dean's plug, because all of my batteries run a Dean's. I didn't want it to mess around with having to undo my heat shrink later down the road and then add the BEC at that time. So I just decided to add it right off the bat, but it is not hooked up. The pigtail for it is just laying here along the side. So when we do decide to go down the road and actually add a BEC into the budget, it's already going to be there. It's just going to be a matter of hooking it up a little bit differently. But I just wanted to mention that for any of you guys who may have noticed that in there and then realized that I hadn't added that into the budget yet. That's going to do it for the overview for this week. As it's going, it is going to turn into a much more capable rig. For those of you guys who are interested more in the technical side of exactly what we did and all of that, watch for the second part of this week's episode to be up here very soon. It will be up before next week, and next week will be its own complete set of upgrades and everything like that. So that's going to do it for this one, guys, and we'll see you in a couple of days with the next one.